Hello, thank you all for being here. So my name is Jackie Del Monte. I work for a company called Allegiance Medical Partners. We are a boutique locum staffing firm, and we place physicians and providers on contract staffing assignments across the country at facilities and hospitals nationwide. So that's who I am. I'd like to thank our panel for being here and let them introduce themselves.
Great. I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Kosser. I'm co-founder and CEO at a company called Virtual Sapiens. We use AI to help professionals improve and eventually master their virtual presence. So we have a big focus on computer vision. So if you think about a Zoom call, you can use our tool to get feedback on eye gaze, facial expression, hand gestures, etc. And we do the table stakes, transcription, filler word detection, etc. So that's me.
Carissa?
Hi, everyone. I'm Elise Weiner. I'm a partner at Boston-based venture capital firm Material Impact. So we invest really at the intersection of material science innovation and impact. So meaningful impact in areas like food, water, healthcare, transportation, sustainability. But my background is really as a marketer, which is why I'm here. And I actually serve as CMO for one of our portfolio companies, a company called Gen Phoenix, which actually translates waste into new material. So leather alternatives for industries like mass transportation, fashion, footwear. So really excited to be here and speak with my fellow panelists today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam. I'm the founder and CEO of Stokes Fire Starters, which is an all-natural fire starter for wood stoves, fireplaces, charcoal grills. And we're sold in a few different local stores across about 30 states. And basically, we're in CPG. And that's my background.
Perfect. So very excited to talk about ringing endorsements from customers today. So starting off, what strategies have you used to turn a customer into an advocate? And I guess we can start with Rachel if you'd like.
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a couple. We sell mostly B2B, right? So we'll sell into teams or we'll sell into universities because our solution provides personalized feedback at scale. What I found to be true, and I'll be curious to hear what you all think, but especially now after the pandemic, we really activated this new channel, right? Video is now a very usable tool to connect with people in a human way that's not video, phone, or having to meet someone in person. And what's been really helpful for us in moving initially just a warm prospect to eventually being an internal champion for you is activating as many of those channels as possible in as diverse a way as possible, right? So you might think of your usual outreach strategy as including these different touch points that are email and then phone and then repeating that in multiple different ways and hopefully getting that in-person meeting. Whereas now you can actually leverage video either in an asynchronous email message or you can have a Zoom call with them pretty early on to establish more of that direct human to human connection, right? And from that point, you build real rapport, which is very possible over video. And from there, you can kind of provide them with opportunities to become more than just words on paper, right? You can give them an opportunity to be a champion for you by initially developing that relationship in a closer, more human way. And so I think, I can get into more detail, but maybe just to start high level, activating those different channels of communication right from the get-go, giving people a versatile understanding of who you are as a person, who your company is and what your product and service empowers, and then giving them the opportunity to share that internally and promote that internally within their company or their institution, I think can be a really powerful thing and has worked really well for us in a number of our main accounts.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think, first of all, this is super interesting and I want to talk to you offline about it. Especially because the company I'm a CMO for is actually in the UK. So you can imagine it's all about video for me. But one of the pieces of advice that I give to entrepreneurs, particularly of early stage companies, is your focus, particularly in your earliest stages of commercialization, really have to be around turning customers into champions. And what I mean by that is it's almost like you have to have this customer obsession to make sure that those accounts really kind of sing your praises. Because one piece of advice I got a long time ago was, it doesn't matter what you say about yourself, it matters what they say about you. And particularly in, many industries that startups serve, right? It's all about, well, who's doing what? It's looking to, on either side of you and saying, what are my competitors using? And taking a chance on an early stage company, right? When you're a large player in industry is really difficult. So serving that account and making sure that they are so thrilled with your product, your service, your technology, and that they can then become a spokesperson for your brand rather than you singing your own praises. That is what is so critical. So a lot of times startups will get a ton of customer interest, right? Off the bat, like from all different industries. And I've seen companies make the mistake of trying to serve all of them, but you can't, right? You have limited resources. You're not going to be able to make the kind of impact that you want or kind of service their needs. And it really dilutes your value proposition out of the gate. So by focusing on one or two marquee customers and making them your champions, they're going to be the ones that you can take quotes from and put them in media or in your press releases or put testimonials on your website. They can serve as reference customers for when you eventually are bringing on new customers. And so, I would always say, and this is a, golden rule with startups, focus is everything, particularly with your early customers. And it's hard to say no, right, when you're out of the gate. So keeping a waiting room of customers and keeping those customers warm while you service your kind of first marquee champion customers is completely okay and expected in industry.
I love that. If you guys want to add, please feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what Rachel was pointing out is it's really important to build relationships with your customers. And I found the best way to do that, although Zoom is very helpful these days, is really getting them in person. And for us being in the consumer products field, getting into the stores and really making connections with those store managers and educating them on your products. Because they have 1,000 products on the shelf. They don't have time to pay attention to yours if you don't give them the time of day. So really trying to build that connection with them and get them to be a spokesperson for your business. They can't do that without proper product education. And, not just caring about your product, ask them about their personal lives. Building an intimate relationship with those customers is really important in order to get them to, promote your product.
Yeah, I'll add one other thing too, is even going beyond the direct relationship that you're building with this customer and eventual champion, but how can you help them establish themselves as a leader and a visionary in this space, right? So in our case, we're a pretty cutting edge technology, and what we're doing is pretty unique. And so any of these partners that we have, we work with them on PR strategies so that as they can externally elevate their own brand and vision, as we're really leaning into the future of work. We want to make sure our students are prepared to communicate virtually as well as in person. Like, they get this amazing opportunity to show peers in their industries that they're doing something that no one else is doing, and they've done it first. And we get to come along for the ride. So there's this interesting, like, I think you mentioned this, right? This, like, don't just you talk about how amazing you think you are.
Right.
But if you can get your partners and your customers to start publicly saying how amazing they think you are, it's this like self-perpetuating, self-reinforcing energy.
Yeah. Like, make your customers famous, honestly. I mean, because a lot of times, you work with industries that are kind of archaic, haven't, maybe had incremental innovation over the years, but haven't seen, like big breakthroughs or steps forward. And by engaging with your technology or your product, now all of a sudden they have a story that they can tell. And so helping to facilitate that, it's going to make them really excited to use your product and technology. I mean, we see this in healthcare all the time, right? Like key opinion leaders and, putting physicians on a pedestal, right, over the brands themselves. It's true across all industries. So it's a great point.
Awesome. I was gonna say, if you guys want to go into this a little bit, just, and I feel like you may have. So if you want to just move on, let me know. But in particular, like, what value would you think, or does an advocate customer provide in helping to achieve goals at that like startup growth level?
I think, yeah, just quickly, like you guys were saying, they're your spokesperson, right?
Yeah.
So they create all the value. Like you said, you can't run around boasting yourself, telling everyone how great you are and how great your products are. You can to some extent. You always got to be your number one advocate, but it's those people that are really going to spread the word of mouth, especially in the startup phase. Tell their friends, friends tell their friends, and it's that third party advice or recommendations that really sell your business.
Someone needs to be first, right? There's
Yeah.
always
Mhm.
needs to be
Yeah.
that one person.
always the
And
hardest.
so, which is really hard. And it's usually that type of customer too. And also you as the startup selecting that first customer is really important, right? So you really want someone who is aligned with your values, aligned with your mission, because they're in it for the long haul with you. And so I think when you can find that first customer, really harnessing that relationship, and as you said, building that rapport beyond just the contractual language of what your relationship means from a business perspective, they are going to be the ones that will hopefully grow with you over time. But you're still in that early stage where you need to prove yourself to that particular customer, right? And so I think it's all about whoever's first, whoever that first person is. I think, there's an entrepreneur within our portfolio who always says, you do the first for love, the second for money. So meaning you may even want to think about, offering them some sort of incentive or value above and beyond what you're going to offer your other customers because they are first. They are such a golden customer. So first for love, second for money, and it always works.
Oh, phenomenal. Okay. So one of the other questions that we had, which kind of dives into maybe you haven't hit the mark necessarily. So if I receive a negative public facing review, how is the best way to handle that situation and hopefully regain the customer's trust as well as the public's?
Have either of you dealt with that as entrepreneurs? I'm curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No one's perfect. Sometimes products do slip through quality control. And recently I had a negative review on one of my online wholesaling platforms. And in order to kind of feel that and work with it in a way that, absolves the issue, but doesn't, dilute your reputation, is just reaching out to the customer saying, hey, I'm really sorry that you had a bad experience. What was the bad experience? Here's replacement for your bad experience. So we shipped them new product free of charge and got them to use and kind of replace what that negative aspect was. So the customer turned around a few weeks later, posted on their Instagram about it, loved the product, is in the process of getting the review removed. But yeah, it's paying attention to what your customer needs are essentially, and knowing that sometimes they do know better than you, and not to take their recommendations all the way to heart and listen to everything they say, but really take them into consideration because at the end of the day, they're the ones selling it, they're the ones using it,
Right.
and it's important to satisfy their needs.
Yeah, we because we go B2B, the way we communicate with the end user is slightly different, right? We usually have a point person who administers the technology within the business, and then if there's an issue, we hear about the issue from our spokesperson usually first, right? And I will say, I think if you're able to, and this all depends on the scale that you're at or you've reached, if you're able to be, number one, very responsive to that piece of feedback, as responsive as possible, I find is always a positive and something that people really appreciate because they've taken the time also to give you some feedback. And then once you've been responsive, I think if you're in a position where you still have a lean team, and as one of the co-founders or C-suite executives, you're the one who's responding to the feedback, that's also a pretty powerful thing to do because people might be expecting, an automated AI response these days, right? But if you have like a very human touch to that, I think acknowledging that there was a mistake here, this is not the standard that you're looking to set up, and then in some cases there may not be an immediate solution, right? Or the solution may take some time, and just explaining what's going to happen, let them know that you're on it, that they've been heard. Those are the kinds of things that I think are necessary initially, and then hopefully you're able to eventually solve and please them and get that nice positive review.
And I think quickly on top of that, it's response time.
Yeah.
You know, when they give you that negative review, it's on the front of their mind, and getting, as soon as you see it, calling or emailing immediately, giving that
Yeah.
personal note like, I'm the founder, sorry you had this experience,
Totally.
and just getting right on top of it, because that's when they're thinking about it, and not pushing for like, oh, we're going to do this so that you remove the review, but sending them what they need, fixing the issue, and then giving it some time, letting them
Yeah.
come back to you. And know if the review's out there for a little bit longer, it's okay,
Mhm.
but it'll come down eventually. And it's important to just
Yeah.
satisfy their needs at the
And
end of the day.
And one thing that I'm noticing, particularly from consumer audiences, is they are really valuing more and more transparency from large brands or small brands, right? As far as what's going on behind the scenes. So, to your point around, you may not be able to offer a solution right away, but being open and transparent around the journey you're on to optimizing your product, to getting better over time, that actually goes a very long way with customers who want to feel like they're part of the brand and connected to the brand. Like you said, none of us are perfect, but we all have technology roadmaps and product development roadmaps that customers don't get to engage with or touch or feel or see. So when that customer says, I wish your product could do this, and you say, guess what, we're working on that. And actually, as part of that process, we're engaging in focus groups, or we're, taking customer feedback. Can you help us on our journey to improve our product? I think that goes a long way as well. And it's the brands that actually take customer data and harness that data and pull it into their own product development roadmaps that are most successful anyways. So it's a win-win for both parties.
Yeah, and it can really end up turning that initial constructive feedback into
Right.
someone who is a champion for
That's
you,
right.
right? Because you're empowering them to have more of a say and an active role in this company, product, or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. It's interesting. This is a very relevant topic for us because we're about to launch on Product Hunt next week, and Product Hunt is notorious for
I've been there.
people are like, ah. So I'm gonna be up on my response time.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Taking our own medicine. So yeah.
Yeah, no, those are actually all very great points. I find myself listening like someone I'm like, oh, that's such a good point. I'm enjoying this. Okay, so you just mentioned feedback. Actually, one of our questions is about feedback, so I feel like maybe we can just spin into that. In which ways can businesses use their customer feedback to improve their services and products? Pivots.
Yeah, I'll start with that one.
Yeah.
I think, kind of touching off what I had said last time, is taking into consideration not all of their feedback, still staying on the path that you're on, not completely deviating your product from what your original ideas were, the vision that you have for your business, but considering all of their points. The only good reviews you get, I think, are the negative ones, because they're really the only ones you can learn from. And all the positive ones are just like a pat on the back, and then you keep moving forward. But fielding critiques to your product and being willing to change for the end goal of customer satisfaction. So I had one meeting a few years ago where the initial product, the packaging wasn't to standard for their store. They wanted to be able to see the product. They wanted to implement plastic into the packaging. And as an all natural brand, I said no, I didn't want to do that. But in the meeting, we worked together to change the packaging and put like a window into the box and make it, it's a die cut, so that there was no plastic involved. And it's, pivoting and working with your customers and clients in order to ensure that the product is what they need and also continues on what you've decided for your brand.
I love that idea around collaborating around the solution, to your
Yeah.
point. I think that's also a really important point that you just made. There are sacred cows that you're going to have as a brand, right? And you're an all natural brand. And so you're not going to deviate. And it's, as you grow, you will absolutely have people who are going to want you to do things that are outside your values. And it becomes really difficult, particularly when, the financial viability of your technology or product is on the line, right? But I love this idea around collaborating on the solution together. Listen, plastic is a non-starter for us, but we totally recognize this, that your customer needs to see the product in order to make a purchase decision. So let's work together on something that works for the two of us. And I think that was a really great path forward that you had.
Yeah, I'll say it's interesting. Our journey with there's been some feedback that we've been getting since like day one. So in the world of conversational AI and AI feedback coaching, et cetera, especially when it's looking at communication, the baseline is really to be providing feedback on what is being said, right? So we'll transcribe your words. We'll let you know how many fillers you've done. We can maybe put some sentiment analysis in there based on the types of words you're using. We did the opposite. We started with what is not being said with the body language, right? Because no one else was doing that in the market. And so it's been interesting. We were very stubborn initially. We were like, we're only doing nonverbals. That is what makes us unique. Now we're multimodal. So we do also analyze what you say, because not only was the feedback coming back pretty consistently, but the expectation of the market changed. And it became very obvious to us that we had already distinguished ourselves with this unique capability initially. And now we had to kind of level out the playing field in terms of customers' expectations. So it had changed from something that was feedback oriented, like, oh, it would be really great if I could get feedback on my filler words, and became an expectation of the market. And that happened like just a few months ago, really, when like ChatGPT came out, and now like, the verbal component of AI is everywhere. So there's an interesting dynamic, I think, between customer feedback and then something that turns from customer feedback into a totally very obvious market dynamic.
Yeah. And one last thing to your point here is like, there's no such thing as a startup that doesn't pivot at some point in its
Pivoting.
trajectory.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a balance between like, what are our values, which are really important, but then what is the market asking for is like super critical to understanding. So you may do all your research and have every intention of providing something that services the needs of the market. And then once you're in market, you're going to get this incredible data, which is exactly what your experience was. And and it takes like a very strong CEO and founder to say, okay, there's been enough of enough input, enough data, enough of a push from the market that we need to expand our offerings or pivot into a new vertical or rethink our business model or rethink our go-to-market strategy. So, listening to data, listening to customer feedback is actually incredibly important, because it's just going to make your business more viable and more relevant to the customer you're serving.
I actually really loved those answers. I was like, oh, that's so interesting, about coming up with the solution. But then also when the market itself is telling you another thing, it's time to pivot.
Yep.
Did we have any questions from? All right, perfect.
Question. So someone online asked, when you find that champion customer, do you potentially make them one of your board members going forward? Or is that kind of a slippery slope?
I certainly haven't, but yeah, do you have
I was just going to say there's an alternative solution to that where it's just called a customer advisory committee or board if you want.
Yeah.
I've seen that work really well. We're at the scale where that doesn't really make sense yet, but if you can select those people and give them this advisory role, they have more influence over the product. It's also something you can use if you're in like a really long sales cycle with like a big business or small business. Even you can say like, we actually have one opening on our customer advisory board where you'll get to sit along all these other amazing leaders. That I find works really well, and it has no actual de facto say, but it becomes a conversation and another touch point that is so kind of out of that normal flow of
A buy-in almost.
And
Yeah.
from an investor perspective, you think about strategic investors, right? So, once your company kind of is in market and, you potentially have some large customers that may have their own CVCs, right? Corporate venture capital groups within those organizations. It's really nice often to have strategics sitting on your board. So not only are they invested in your business, so now they have skin in the game, but they're also a customer. And it also opens up like customer opportunities. So I always say that adding strategics later on in a company, I think early on it's difficult because it sends a signal to the market, like to that customer's competitors, oh, they're already working with them.
Yeah.
We don't want to necessarily get involved, right? So what I've actually seen work very well and very strategically is actually having more than one strategic on your board. when the timing is right. So you might have competitors or customers that are representative of different verticals that you serve. But what's great about those customers is those are your potential acquisition targets, right? So now all of a sudden they have skin in the game, they're invested in the business, they're customers themselves, and they're following along to see when you hit certain milestones that make you a viable acquisition target. So I think that that's a great way to engage like customers from a B2B perspective, right? From a B2C perspective, I think there's all sorts of cool things you can do from like a focus group perspective or a, consumer advisory board perspective, or just like even in a small way is incentivizing people with like an Amazon gift card to fill out a survey, right? So could imagine you doing something like that, right? To be like, we need some customer feedback on their product experience, right? Here's a little sweetener to be able to provide us with some feedback. And that's kind of like a lower lift way to engage customers and make them feel like they're part of something.
And I think kind of speaking to that, not necessarily going directly to like board positions, but like pre-startup, when you just have an idea, you just have a product starting out, going to family and friends, that people that you trust that will tell you when things are bad or when you don't look good, and go to them for advice. Like, pitch to them, give them the product, ask for honest feedback. And they're going to be the people that, to this day, I still go to some of my best friends and closest family with advice and questions about products and where to go with the brand. And yeah, so I think keeping those in your close circle and using them as, not board members, but reliable advocates.
Awesome.
Good on the digital front. Did anyone in the room? We have a couple. Yes.
Hi, just about this last comment, going back to family and friends. There's a book that I read, I suppose, like a couple of weeks ago. It's called The Mom Test, which explains how to go about it, but in a way that it doesn't bias them. Just a comment.
That's a great book. It's short. Yeah, it's great.
What was it called?
The Mom Test.
The Mom Test. Oh, that's
Because
interesting.
moms rule the world. So.
Oh, that
Yeah.
does make sense.
Yeah, sure.
It's also like asking people about your product in a like you almost like assume that in general your mom might not be so well versed in your space, and so
Right.
you're like, if you take this product to her and she's like, I don't know, or whatever, it's helpful to get that like super non-biased
Interesting.
view. Yeah,
It's a
it's
really
a
good
short
point of view.
read. I would recommend it too.
Because
It's a
how
great
often does your
point.
mom not know what you do? Right? If
Very
you ask,
often.
she was asked.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great panel so far. It's really interesting to hear about like a lot of one-to-one in terms of the customer. Have you guys done anything that's like one-to-many, or even where you're not even in the picture, creating communities with your customers to interact with one another? I know that's a challenge in a number of ways, but just curious if you guys have navigated those waters. Some of my clients need more scale and they don't have bigger customers. So anyway, just curious about that.
Just quickly, what's your business?
I'm a marketing consultant for startups.
Okay. So I think in that regard, social media, right? It's like, in order to create small focus groups, of really strong and really negative feedback, is just putting anything you have out there. And just like, we don't get a ton of response on our social medias. We're really, in store, person to person, but just even little groups like that, the comment sections, people really like to talk, and you get replies, and it's free. So
Right.
most of the time.
And from a B2B perspective, what I've seen work well, particularly like in more of the industrial or manufacturing space, but also in like software space, are webinars. So, this is an opportunity where you may not be able to get FaceTime with customers all at one place, or, beyond webinars, obviously there's a lot of events that are going to be focused on the areas where, many of your customers are going to be. So having a booth or sponsoring a panel or having a private meeting room where you take a bunch of meetings with a lot of customers. So I think meeting customers where they are. So from, your world, I think we're so used now to engaging with brands online and virtually. And so a webinar where you kind of introduce your product or service, you do a training on it, you kind of, open the doors to what your technology is all about. and make a recording of it and make that recording available. You can reach a lot of customers in that way. In some cases, you could even offer a discount for webinar participants or some sort of incentive that gets them excited about participating. But I also think now that in the post kind of COVID era that we're opening up trade shows and events again, I'm just seeing my portfolio companies have so much success kind of being in person and having a presence at these events where not only do you have like all your customers in one place, but you also have all the media that's interested in that particular segment in one place where you can tell your story kind of to a broader audience. So I would say, you know, using social media, using digital assets, but also like getting together with customers. It's worth the investment, particularly if you can hit a lot of people at one time.
I was going to say, I love that. I find, you know, just teaching because you're willing
Yeah.
to give them information and therefore
Yep.
solicit their interest in what you're saying, at least.
That's right.
Did we have any? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Paul Bergeron. I'm a physician executive, and I started a company called the Startup MD about a year ago. It's been extraordinarily successful, and what I'm trying to figure out is how do I leverage the positive experiences that many of the customers have had,
Yeah.
whether through social media or any other avenue that you would suggest.
Sure.
Thank
This
you.
is like my number one thing. And I'm sure you guys feel the same way. Because like I said earlier, like it doesn't matter what you say about yourself. It matters what your customers have to say about you. So there's just so much you can do, particularly with like social media. I think as now putting on my consumer hat, every time I'm about to go engage with the brand, where do I go, right? I go to Yelp, I go to their social media platform, I go to their website, right? These are your digital storefronts, if you will. And so I think customer testimonials are great. You know, even if it's a quote that you can put on your website. You know, one step beyond that is filming people who've had a really great experience with your brand. And we're all used to like our iPhones as our cameras. This does not need to be like the old age of like fancy high production value type of content. You know, if somebody who's engaged with your brand that is like a champion for you and just say, hey, would you be willing to let us film you and kind of you talk about your experience and your experience before us, right? So what was their experience like prior to engaging with you? You know, obviously, especially when I think about healthcare, there's so much like red tape, there's so much frustration, it's difficult to get an appointment, right? So naming kind of all of the pain points that individual went through before they found you and how it's kind of changed their life for the better, that's going to resonate with people who've shared in that exact same experience. So, you know, and then from a B2B perspective, case studies are fantastic. You know, and when you think about a case study, it doesn't have to be this long-winded document. It can literally be like a one-pager, quick hit about how a brand, what they were challenged with before, what your solution was, and what the outcome and results were, right? That's the big piece, right? How did their business change? How did their revenue change? How did their efficiency change? How did their kind of quality of life change? Those are the three segments and ingredients of a case study, if you will. And you can make that case study available on your website. You can pull pieces or quotes from it and put them on social media. But yeah, let the customer speak for you. And what's great is there's so many free tools to be able to really, you know, amplify that voice.
Yeah, and if you're going to do, I think a very streamlined way of getting testimonials in is to have a structured way of getting them out, right? So if you can have a process behind anything, it becomes a repeatable process. It becomes easier. So if you have, okay, I would love to request a testimonial about your experience. Here are the 3 questions you can think about, you know, or in the case study example, right? Like having your format so that you just plug the information in. Like most of the time, those pieces of information will fall into place quite nicely. And just makes the whole thing a little easier, because I find it can be challenging sometimes to get this positive feedback. And to your point earlier, where you're like, oh, the positive feedback, you're like, okay, great, onwards. And it's like, no, you had those are like, that's such gold. You've worked so hard, you know, to get that. Like, capitalize on that. Make it easy for yourself.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for being here today. Regarding B2B companies, when you have a a user within an organization, but a different type of stakeholder within an organization that also have a role in the final decision making. That building the internal champion within the organization, do you have a common tactic suggestion how to deal with that?
Yeah, so we've dealt with a lot of that, and we've seen it in most cases. What we see is initially, right, you want to find whoever is going to be able to move you around to all of the right people internally as quickly as possible, right? There are some people who can become your champion like with so much steadfast enthusiasm, but they're actually not they're not in the right position.
Decision maker.
Right. And then you end up wasting a lot of
Mhm.
time, and it feels great because they're so wonderful to you, but like you're not getting anywhere. So you have to very quickly understand who is in a position to take you around to the other decision makers. One of our major clients is a big university, and the director of the faculty was that person, and she brought us around to the board, and they required unanimous consent from the board to adopt our technology within this university. In another case, we work with a coaching firm, and they have a lead of, like, if you're able to find the title, like for us, it's oftentimes like the head of digital innovation or digital learning, right? And it's whoever's like leading, how is AI going to affect our business? Find that representative, and it should become pretty clear pretty quickly if they have the capacity internally to take you where you need to go. Or if you need to ask them for an introduction, like get the other people in the room, right? If they're not going to do it for you, get the other people into the room, whether it's virtual or in person, and build the relationship beyond that person as quickly as possible.
Perfect. We have a few more questions.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll
Yeah.
check the, you go
Okay,
ahead. I'll check
perfect.
digital.
So what are some challenges companies face when trying to turn their customers into champions? And whoever would like to start, Elise.
I think, you know, it's interesting. So you as a startup or early stage company, right, are incentivized to like shake things up and disrupt, right? When you think about large companies, so this is more B2B focused, they are incentivized to just keep things rolling, right? And not disrupt the existing thing that they're working on. So your incentives are not aligned because in many cases, people who work at the company, if they screw up something that's working really well, they could lose their job, right? And you know, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, all right, you know, this is really exciting what you're offering, but how do I know you're going to be around tomorrow, right? Like, how do I know you're not going to go out of business? Like, we've been working with this particular vendor, or this service provider, this technology for decades. It hasn't broken. Yeah, we know we're losing money on this. Yeah, we know it's inefficient. Yeah, we know it's not great for the environment, but we're scared to take a risk, right? And so these are the challenges that you need to overcome to give them the sense of kind of, you know, credibility that you are tried and tested. Like, listen, we are going to pay to test this technology and be, you know, hit specific milestones that you set as the customer to be able to prove to you that we work. And again, if it's the first company, you may fund that yourself for part of the love and money type of value proposition, right? And also, we want to make you famous, right? So this individual may be like in middle management, and this is an opportunity for them to kind of make a name for themselves and be credited with introducing this disruption to the industry and saving X, Y, and Z dollars. And so, you know, I would say one of the things we do as marketers often is like to develop these personas for your customers, which it feels kind of silly sometimes, you know, diving into, okay, you know, John Doe, here's who this is where he studied, this is where he what's meaningful and important to him, these are what his values are all about, but also understanding like what was he hired to do and what are his goals within the business. So, you know, okay, let's just say he's trying to have some sort of impact on the bottom line, or he's been tasked with going out and finding something that's more sustainable, but also at a price parity to what they have today, et cetera. Know those goals and help him get a win, right? At the end of the day. So I see startups like come forward to customers and they're like, oh, we're out of MIT and we have this huge innovation. It's been published in all these academic journals. TechCrunch just did an article on it. And then you're talking to some guy in it, like a manufacturing facility that's like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
that's awesome. But
Doesn't
like,
help me.
yeah, I just want to know your work, you
Yeah.
know, and that I'm not going to like lose my hat over this. So, I think it's really important to overcome that challenge is to collaborate with your customer to understand like what are their goals, what do you need to do to be able to be viewed as credible, tried, tested, safe, because those are the things that actually your customer is going to value a hell of a lot more than the fact that you've raised venture dollars or that you won Fast Company's most innovative company. And in some cases, the senior leadership may care about that kind of stuff, right? But your particular champion, the person who's actually going to be implementing your technology or service, they care about a very different set of criteria. And the closer you can be to understanding that, the more you're going to be able to turn them into a champion for you and your brand.
Oh, that's so good. I was gonna say, does anyone else have anything they want to add?
Yeah, so I think kind of two ways to look at it from the hard goods side of things. When we're dealing with individual stores, is kind of understanding, managers have goals for different sections of the stores, what margins they need to make, how much volume they need to move, and ensuring that you understand what their goals in your area of the store are and how your product's actually going to get them to those goals. And so on top of that, having an understanding of their world and what's going on there is having a product that works and sampling it and giving them free product, getting them to try it, getting them to understand how it works, and that they can back you in the sense of effectiveness, right? So if they don't know the product or they haven't tried it, you're not going to be able to build that relationship and continue on,
Right.
in regards to sampling.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add from the strictly software side, I think we've been noticing an increasing expectation to get stuff for free, like software for free, because the cost structure can be hard for people to understand. So when we've done pilots, and I do think, some people will say like never pilot, go straight for the sale. But most companies we've found require that test evaluation pilot period. And it can be used to a benefit to really prove that you're there to in a sustainable way. But when you do set up that pilot, you have to be very clear about what the success metrics are, to your point, and what happens when those success metrics are achieved. It should move smoothly into the sale. Oftentimes we get so focused on this pilot period and then we're successful and we're like, yay. And then the conversation stalls, right?
Yeah.
So being clear about that success metric, where it goes from there, and also that you're giving them something of value, right? It can be easy to say like, yeah, we'll just set you up for free, no problem. And it's like, oh, okay, the value of this pilot is this much money. And because we're so invested in developing a real partnership for the future with you, we're going to comp the whole thing, or we're going to give you this amazing discount. But like, it's not free. Right? Like, I think establishing that value is critical for these young startups who are often tripping over themselves to be like, yeah, here you go. And then the value doesn't get established up front. And then when you come time to talk about how expensive it is, people are like, oh, but like, you just did all that for almost nothing. So we can negotiate more. Like you can strategically set yourself up for more success by just acknowledging some of those points up front.
And to that end, it's a really good point is you don't have to be all things to all people. I think it's really important for a brand to establish this is who we're for and this is who we're not for, right? And there are going to be customers who fall into the not for bucket that we don't have to please, right? Because what they're asking for is so above and beyond or different from what it is that we're offering. It's trying to make them happy is going to dilute the thing we're really good at. So it's okay to say no. I think that's really hard for startups to hear. But if you get an inquiry that they're asking for all this custom development work or things that go above and beyond what you do or outside your values as a sustainable business, it's okay to say, listen, it's just not what we offer. If you ever, change what it is that you're looking for, we're happy to engage, but it's just not something we offer today, like a free service.
Right.
I absolutely love that. I was actually going to say, yeah, just understanding your bandwidth and knowing your wheelhouse in the beginning that's how you get something out that works.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we have any other online questions? All right. So there was one question in particular. I know a lot of people are in the startup space, and like funding yourself in startups is a big deal. So we have a question. What do investors look for as far as customer traction and engagement when when evaluating new investments, Elise? Because I know you work
Yeah.
kind of in that venture capital space.
Yeah, sure. So, we invest very early stage at Material Impact. So, in most cases, we're looking at companies that are pre-revenue, pre-commercialization, or maybe just kind of like having some early customer traction in market. So, it's not like we're looking for sales or some revenue target when we're like evaluating the technology or the market or the opportunity. But we are looking to see that you're hitting on a real market need, right? So obviously there's the macro view. As a company, you can kind of look at, okay, look, this is the size of the market, this is what's happening, in the kind of geopolitical landscape, in the macroeconomic landscape that makes this like a really exciting thing to be working on right now. I'm sure when you were both starting your businesses, you kind of like just did your own market research, right? On like who are the competitors out there? This people are, obviously you had this big moment in time with COVID, which probably like really changed the entire work dynamic, right? And sustainability is now like extremely important. So consumers are starting to make much more conscious decisions in their buying power. So you had a bunch of like macro data to kind of influence investors like, hey, this is an important area to invest. What I also like to see from an investor perspective is like early customer interest. And there's a lot of different ways you can garner that early customer interest, whether it be a pilot that you're doing with a large customer, even if it's an unpaid pilot, but you're working with that customer and there's a line of sight to growth and expansion within that customer account. That's great. An LOI, right? A letter of intent where a customer says something like, if you hit these particular milestones, we are going to buy from you. And getting that in writing, I think that's another a great way to kind of prove like we're hitting on something that's meaningful and we have a customer waiting in the wings. Testimonials, and a testimonial doesn't necessarily have to be of a customer that has been using your product or service and can speak to how wonderful it is. It can be around like, if this particular brand can do what they say they're going to do, it's going to be game changing for our industry, right? Like, and you can draft this for this individual, right? And just be like, listen, I'm raising money. You've been a great champion for me. You've been helping me kind of define my product requirements. Can we put together a quote that I can include in my investor materials that talks about why you need a service or a product like mine, right? So again, this is just more like proof points of, there's the macro view, which is going to be all like market research data, but the personal customer view, the more you can like kind of harness that early on in your customer relationships is really exciting for an investor to see like, hey, we believe that the customers will be there. If they build it, they will come. So that's really what you're trying to prove to your investor audience.
Oh, I love that.
And I think kind of speaking from, not the
The other
VC side of things,
side.
understanding your product velocity. So say you're a small business, you've been in for a few years, you're looking to raise around a VC, understanding how your product lines up to competitors on a numeric, system, and really understanding through your points of distribution, through your average price, if you're priced correctly, and if you're actually moving on the shelf. And if your product gets placed in store next to your direct competitor, which one's going to sell based off the numbers. That's a huge point to be able to bring to a possible round of VC or bring to the table and have there just show them that, look, here's hard evidence that above and beyond all other products, if mine's placed right here, it's going to sell. And so having that as a key point just to bring in is, I think, extremely important.
Awesome. I mean, I think that's pretty much all the questions we had. Did anyone in the audience have any last questions, or did we have any from online?
Still quiet online right now, but anyone in the audience right now?
I had one thing.
Oh,
to
yeah,
share.
or
I
anything
thought-
extra, please.
I just wanted to say, like, I don't think any of what we've shared is easy. Like, I think a lot of it takes
Fair point.
time. It's like you're building new muscles, right? Like, I used to be a professional ballet dancer, danced with Boston Ballet for 10 years. I'm used to criticism, very personal criticism, but it's nothing like starting a company and then going out into a completely different world and having a team of people you're responsible for, and then putting something out that you think is like good and then getting hard to hear feedback, right? And so I think it's totally normal to feel crushed when you get that amazingly helpful but like hard to hear feedback, right? And in developing some of that muscle to receive the feedback, filter it through to something helpful is a very, very powerful tool as a founder or as a human in general. And I've had to learn a lot of these lessons that I've shared over the past few years since starting Virtual Sapiens. So, find what works for you, capitalize on those opportunities of positive feedback. And then when that constructive feedback comes in or super harsh feedback comes in, like, give yourself the time to digest it and don't just expect yourself to be like, haha, that's what I've been waiting for. Like, it's hard.
Yeah. Love it.
Is any last minute thoughts from the other panelists at all?
Just thanks for having us.
I was like, I
Yes.
really,
I
really enjoyed
learned a
listening
lot.
to you guys.
Yeah, I learned a lot from the two.
Sitting over here learning. Did we have any other questions?
I think we're good. I think we're all
All
set.
Right.
Thank you so
guys
much to the panel, to the moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. You guys did a great job.